Alright, welcome to the Abstract Project, Part 1. In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to create these sort of abstract kind of gems. And essentially, you're going to create 30 of these and then put them on some sort of base, add materials, and lighting. So here's just a quick little render that I did in Maya here of my little abstract objects here. And I'll show you how to do this. I'm going to turn off wireframe on shaded. The one thing you'll notice with some of these materials that you apply, and there's some unique ones on these objects. Sometimes the render in here will be kind of transparent and it won't really read correctly in the viewport. So it's a good idea to turn on this wireframe on shaded, which allows you to do that by clicking this little icon here or going into the shading menu and checking it here. So again, shading, wireframe on shaded, just make sure that little box is checked on there. Alright, so that's just a little quick little tidbit about the shading. As you can see with each of these objects here, they're kind of simply sculpted sort of rock or gem sort of structures. Some are kind of rotated and pushed and pulled in different ways. And the mesh itself is subdivided to some degree. So just to take a look at some of these. So I'm going to share how to create some of these guys. I'm going to go ahead and hide this entire group here by hitting the H key. Again, if you want to bring it back, just hit Shift H, and H is the hotkey. And I'm going to show off the, I'm going to bring back the ground plane here, which is this little icon here, to bring back the grid. And then I'm going to add a Polygon Cube. Again, in the Poly Modeling shelf, just clicking on the cube here. I can frame on it by hitting the F key. And you'll notice that this has not much in terms of divisions. So that's the first thing you're going to have to change. So the first thing I do before is I don't want a square kind of form. I think they tend to work better if you, and I have a few that are kind of square, but it's better to kind of make maybe a more rectangular one. So I'm going to grab my good old scale tool here and just scale out and just kind of pull out a little bit of that geometry there. Something like that will be kind of cool. Now I'm going to come over here in my channel box. Again, that's the far right icon here. Click on the top here. And in here, if you click on our Poly Cube, you have the subdivisions, the width, height, and depth. So I'm going to highlight each of those and then middle mouse and drag a couple of times. So I get about 4 divisions to start with. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to go into the component mode. So you can right click on it, remember as before, and go to these vertex, edge, or face and grab these individual components and do that just by right clicking. But you can also click on the Modeling Toolkit, which is the far left icon of these little icons up here. And here's the same component. So you can click on vertex, edge, or face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on vertices. Or actually, I think I'll click on face. And I'm just going to grab one of these and then switch to my move tool. By the way, if your navigator is big or small, like this one seems a little bit big, you can hit the minus key to kind of bring it back, or the plus key to make it a little bigger. And what I want to do is just make some simple adjustments to this. I might select a couple of faces here and kind of pull out. You'll notice I'm starting to deform this just very slightly. So I might want to, maybe I grab like this whole section by just marquee selecting over it and kind of squishing it a little bit. You want to be careful. You don't want it to pierce through where you get like black showing through, because that makes the geometry messed up. Basically, you're pushing inverted faces and creating non-linear faces. So you just want to be careful not to do too much. So yeah, basically just trying out some things. I might go into edge mode. So I'll click on edges here, and I'm going to select this edge and then double click on this edge to select that edge line, and then maybe pull it back a little bit. So I just want to change this, make some very simple kind of shape changes. I might even go into vertex mode and do this by grabbing a bunch of these vertices and just kind of pulling forward, something like that. So, basically just trying to play around with the shape of this in a very simple way. Maybe I'll pull it up a little bit and then maybe grab these guys and kind of pull down. Yeah, just trying out different things. I'm not sure I like that. Polygon is a little stretched. I think something like that looks pretty good as a starting point. Now this is just a starting point, so I'm going to go out of component mode by clicking this little object icon here. And again, all I've been doing is just using the move tool and manipulating some of the points, either the vertices, edges, or faces, to kind of make it a little more organic. At this point though, I want to subdivide the mesh, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the sculpting tools. So over here in the sculpting shelf, there are some sculpting tools that we can try out, but if you try it on this kind of geometry, it's just not enough. And I'll demo this real quick here. If I grab this first tool, I'm going to double click on it to go into the tool settings for it. Typically the strength is really high on these tools, so I think by default it's like 15. Right now I've set it to 0.035 here. And the way it works, if you hit the B key and middle mouse and drag, you get to change the size of the brush there. But when you double click on this object, you can change the size here, which would be the size of the brush, right? So if you adjust that there, you'll see it. But I like to do on the freehand sort of way with the B key and just kind of push and drag. So you hold down B and then middle mouse and drag to create your size of your brush. And then right now it has symmetry on. You can see that by it's going on both sides here. You can turn off symmetry right here. It's in the world X. So you can click on it and just turn off so you can have a more organic kind of way of working. So watch what happens when I click and drag here. Nothing seems to be happening. Let's go ahead and increase that value here. I'm going to actually, let me reset the tool. Yeah, it's a value of 15. So watch what happens as I let me reduce the size of my brush here. Let's see here. There we go. The brush size was crazy big. So now as I drag across here, you can see what happens. The geometry pushes out way too far. So I'm going to undo that action. And again, I'm going to go back to a value of like, let's try 0.2. Let's see what that does. And you can start to see it starting to move, push out the geometry. But it's not doing much. It's kind of creating these facets because the geometry is not subdivided enough. So I'm going to close out and let's subdivide this mesh here. So I have to select it again, click on the arrow to escape out, select the object. And then in your modeling toolkit, we have this area called add divisions. What this will do is it'll subdivide each polygon and divide it in half. So once I click on that, you start to see it's being subdivided. And it basically turns one quad into 4. So it's subdividing it into fourths. And you could change the divisions in the number here. I could add 2. And that's going to be quite a bit of geometry there. That's enough now to start sculpting here. So let's grab that sculpting tool again and try out. And you can start to see we're getting a smoother result in terms of pulling out that geometry. And that's what this first brush does. It kind of pushes out the geometry. This one here in the far left. Now if I want to smooth it out, I can hold the shift key as I'm drawing across it, and that will smooth the vertices and kind of push them together. Right? So holding the shift key kind of smooths out the edges. If I just drag across, I get sort of sculpted area kind of coming out. If you hold the control key, and I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller here. Again, by holding down the B key and then left or right click, middle click of the mouse here. And I'm going to hold control and click inside. And you can start to see I'm kind of creating a cavern sort of structure here. I'm actually carving out that geometry there. So again, holding down control will kind of do that. It tends to create a little bit of problem areas, so you want to possibly smooth it out afterwards. So that's I'm holding down the shift key to kind of smooth out a little bit, and that looks pretty good. So you can kind of have fun exploring how much of this kind of geometry you want to push out and pull. There are other tools here you can try out. If you hover over each one, they kind of tell you what they do. So I've got this render here, I'm going to pull it out and just kind of move it off to the side here. In the bottom left corner here, if I hover over these, they'll kind of tell you what this does. So this one evens out the surface, which is the smoothing. This one doesn't change the shape. This one will pull a single vertice. So you can see here it's like a grab brush. So I can again increase the size of this brush and make some bigger movements here. So as I grab upwards or downwards, I can kind of pull it and really kind of make some interesting choices in terms of structure. You want to be careful though not to pull it in a way where again it caves in on itself too much or pulls out too much. So yeah, you can have fun with some of these brushes. Try out whatever ones you want on here. These are the ones that I tend to use a lot. Is this one, the grab brush, and then mainly just this one. Some of the other ones are okay. Like this one will kind of smooth down an area. So if we make this brush smaller here, it'll kind of follow the pattern here, whatever kind of thing you're working on. So if I click in here, it'll kind of try and smooth and average out that plane. So everything will kind of flatten out along there. So yeah, try out these different brushes. Again, I tend to use just this regular sculpting brush. And we could subdivide this one more time and get even a little bit more of a render. Let's add division to this. Again, click on the arrow. Let's add one more division on here. And this looks pretty good. I wouldn't go any further in terms of divisions for this. It depends on your computer. This might be too much for the computer to handle, so just be aware of that. But I'm going to go ahead and you can see here I'm getting a much smoother sculpt as I come in here, and let me minimize this little render here. And I can hold the shift key and kind of smooth out areas and basically pull out whatever area I want. Again, hold B with the middle mouse to make a bigger selection if I want to have a larger area of this to kind of poof out. And you're basically just kind of rotating around to get a different angle, right? That's really important to rotate around, because if you don't rotate around, you'll end up just kind of selecting one side or one angle. Don't forget you can also hold the control key to kind of go cave inwards instead of out, and then you can hold shift to smooth out areas. I do like some sharp edges, so having a few of these sharp edges isn't a bad idea. And be wary of some things that look too kind of bulby. Sometimes I'll smooth that out or carve it out a little bit by holding down the control key. So the idea here is to create 30 of these little forms. Let's go ahead and bring our other group back by hitting Shift H. And you can see this one, is a little bit small for the other ones. I've definitely scaled them up. And I could totally do that. I could select this object and scale it up to the appropriate size, with these other ones and kind of match it up. Don't be afraid to, once you have an object, you could duplicate it. So I can hold the Shift key, make a copy, and then I can further refine and change this one. So sometimes I'll do this as an exercise. For example, let me delete this for a sec here. When I add my poly cube, my original cube here, and I'll start off with just a base mesh here. I'll kind of scale it out a little bit, maybe a little bit wider. Let's make this one a little bit bigger here. So something like that, and then I'll go into the channel box again and go to the poly cube and subdivide this by highlighting the width and the divisions as a middle click and drag. Again, you can just type in a value here. If you highlight these, you can type in a value of like 5 if you wanted to. And then you can go into the component mode, right? So selecting individual vertices, faces, etc., etc. Kind of start moving points around. Or you can right click with the mouse if you prefer that method and start manipulating. And having fun with that is kind of cool. But the thing is, once you have one of these base meshes, again, you could duplicate, and then start manipulating each one. So you don't have to start all over again with the mesh. You could start off, I think at some state like this would be pretty good to duplicate, and then you can individually make each one more unique. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. This is kind of going over the process of just creating the gemstones themselves, the sort of abstract forms. And the next tutorial will cover how to create a base for these wonderful objects. Until then, see you soon. Cheers.